The darkness of the basement swallowed me whole as I pounded against the heavy wooden door, my fists aching with each desperate strike. "Isabel! Isabel, please!" My voice cracked, raw and pleading, echoing off the stone walls that Richard had so lovingly restored 15 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. Trapped in the very foundation my husband had rebuilt with his own hands, imprisoned in the home I'd purchased with money I'd earned through 30 years of relentless work. From the other side of that locked door, I heard my daughter's voice, my only child, the baby girl I'd held at 3 in the morning after 16-hour workdays, the toddler whose first steps I'd missed because of a board meeting, the young woman whose college graduation I'd attended via video call from a pharmaceutical conference in Geneva. Her words came through clear and sharp, each syllable a knife to my heart. "Now this house is ours." Derek's laughter joined hers, and the sound made my stomach turn. My son-in-law, the charming real estate agent who'd swept into our lives 4 years ago with his practiced smile and his talk of family values. The man I'd defended to Richard when my husband expressed quiet reservations about something off in Derek's eyes. The man who was now celebrating stealing everything I'd built. My legs gave out. I slid down against the door, my tailored Chanel suit, the navy one I'd worn to my retirement party 6 months ago, catching on the rough wood. 32 years. 32 years since I'd held that screaming, red-faced infant in the hospital and promised her the world. Promised her she'd never know the poverty I'd grown up with, never wear secondhand clothes to school like I had, never watch her mother choose between heating and groceries. I'd kept that promise. God, how I'd kept it. Private schools, a penthouse apartment in Manhattan, 5 different career attempts that I'd funded without complaint, a wedding that cost more than my first year's salary as a pharmaceutical sales rep. And this was my reward, locked in my own basement like discarded furniture. "Adrian." Richard's voice cut through my spiral, calm and steady as always. I turned to look at my husband of 35 years, his gray hair disheveled from being dragged down the stairs, his glasses slightly crooked on his face. How could he be so calm? How could he stand there, shoulders relaxed, hands loose at his sides, when our daughter had just drugged us, dragged us into the basement, and stolen our home? "Stop screaming," he said, and I wanted to slap him. Stop screaming? Our child was upstairs right now, probably calling a lawyer to forge documents, planning to sell the $8 million mansion we'd lived in for 20 years, and he wanted me to stop screaming? "Richard, she's taking everything. Derek's up there. He's probably—" My voice broke. The Parkinson's diagnosis I'd hidden for 4 months made my hands shake worse than usual. Tremors I'd blamed on stress, but knew were something darker, something I hadn't wanted to face. Something I'd planned to tell my family about after I'd gotten my affairs in order. After I'd set up the medical research institute that would be my real legacy, after I'd— "Listen to me," Richard interrupted, his hands on my shoulders, firm and grounding. His eyes held something I couldn't quite read. Not panic, not fear, certainty. They don't know what I left hidden back there. I stared at him, confusion cutting through the panic. "What are you talking about? There's nothing down here except your old architectural plans and some wine I was saving for—" He was already moving toward the back wall, the one made of original Victorian brick that he'd insisted on preserving during the renovation. His fingers traced a pattern on the stones, pressing specific bricks in a sequence I didn't recognize. What was he doing? We'd been married for 35 years, lived in this house for 20, and I'd never seen him do this before. A clicking sound echoed through the basement, then another, and then, impossibly, the entire back wall began to slide to the left. My breath caught in my throat. Behind the brick facade was a space I'd never known existed. A room, maybe 10 by 12 feet, lit by soft emergency lighting that flickered on automatically. My mind struggled to process what I was seeing. A desk with a laptop, cables running up through the ceiling. A wall safe, professional grade, the kind you'd find in a bank. Filing cabinets. A phone mounted on the wall. An old-style landline I didn't know we had, and photographs. Dozens of photographs pinned to a corkboard, surveillance-style images of people I recognized. Of Isabel. Of Derek. "Richard." My voice came out barely above a whisper. "What is this?" He stepped into the hidden room, and I followed on shaking legs. The space smelled like paper and electronics, lived in but secret. How many times had he been down here while I'd been upstairs, working on my laptop, organizing my retirement, planning the medical research institute that would help people with conditions like mine? How many secrets had my quiet, gentle husband been keeping? "Sit down," he said, pulling out the desk chair for me. I sat, unable to take my eyes off the corkboard. There was Isabel at a coffee shop, talking on her phone, her expression animated and angry. Derek in his car, clearly having a heated conversation with someone. Multiple photos of them entering and leaving our house over the past weeks, timestamps in the corners, showing early morning visits, late-night arrivals when Richard and I had been asleep. 2 years ago, Richard began, his voice steady and measured, the same tone he used when explaining architectural concepts to clients. I discovered that Isabel had forged a power of attorney document. She tried to transfer the deed of this house into her name. The words hit me like a physical blow. 2 years. 2 years ago, while I'd been navigating the complexities of selling my pharmaceutical company, while I'd been negotiating the $40 million exit package that would fund my retirement and my philanthropic dreams, my daughter had been trying to steal from me. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question came out choked, strangled by the betrayal blooming in my chest. Richard's expression softened with something like regret. "Because you were already carrying the weight of the world, Adrian. The company sale, the transition, all that pressure, because I wanted to protect what was left of your relationship with her. Because I hoped," he paused, reaching out to touch my face gently. "I hoped I was wrong, that it was Derek manipulating her, that she'd come to her senses." He opened the safe, and I saw stacks of cash, jewelry I'd thought was in our safety deposit box at the bank, and thick folders of documents. He pulled out one folder, laying it on the desk in front of me. Inside were copies of legal documents, all bearing Isabel's signature, some clearly forged with my own signature next to hers. Transfer of property documents, loan applications using the house as collateral, attempts to access my investment accounts. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Not yet. Not until I understood the full scope of this nightmare. "After I discovered the first attempt," Richard continued, turning to the laptop, "I installed security cameras throughout the house, hidden ones. I needed to know if this was ongoing, if she'd try again, if Derek was the mastermind, or if our daughter was—" He couldn't finish that sentence. Neither could I. He opened the laptop, and the screen came to life with multiple video feeds. Our living room, my office, the kitchen, the master bedroom. I've been watching, recording, documenting everything for 2 years. I contacted a lawyer quietly, built a case, but I couldn't bring myself to pull the trigger. She's our daughter. I kept thinking she'd stop, that maternal instinct would kick in, that love would win. He clicked on a video file dated 3 weeks earlier. The timestamp showed 2 in the morning. On screen, I watched Isabel and Derek in my office, going through my filing cabinets. My daughter, wearing black clothes like some kind of burglar, photographing my financial documents with her phone while Derek stood guard at the door. "That's not even the worst one," Richard said quietly, clicking to another file. This one was from 6 weeks ago. Derek was on the phone in our guest room, pacing. The audio was crystal clear. "Yeah, it's 8 million easy," Derek's voice came through the speakers. "The old lady doesn't have a clue. She's so busy playing philanthropist, planning her little charity projects. She doesn't notice we're mapping out everything." A pause, then. "No, she won't be a problem. Neither will he. We've got it handled. Once we get them out of the way, I can have the deed transferred, the house sold, and your money in your hands within 6 weeks." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk, my knuckles white. Who's he talking to? But even as I asked, I knew. Loan sharks, criminals, people Derek owed money to. $320,000, Richard answered. In gambling debts, sports betting mostly, online casinos. He's been borrowing from dangerous people for the past 18 months, and now they want their money, with interest. He clicked to another video. This one made me want to vomit. Isabel, sitting on our living room couch 3 weeks ago, crying in Derek's arms. "She never loved me, not really," my daughter sobbed. "She only ever loved her work, her success, her perfect career. Now I'm going to take what she loves most. This house, the symbol of everything she achieved while ignoring me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The pain in my chest wasn't my heart breaking. It was something deeper, something fundamental in my understanding of the world, shattering into pieces. I had failed, not as a CEO, not as a businesswoman, but as a mother. I had failed so completely that my child hated me enough to destroy me. "There's more," Richard said gently, and I wanted to scream that there couldn't possibly be more, that I couldn't take any more revelations. But he was already pulling up another file. This is from yesterday morning. On the screen, Isabel sat alone in her car in our driveway, talking on the phone. "Mom, I'll be over around 11, she was saying, her voice sweet and loving, the voice she used when she wanted something. Then she hung up and immediately dialed another number. "Derek, I told her we're coming for brunch. Make sure you bring the sedatives, the ones you got from your pharmacy contact. It'll just be enough to knock them out for a few hours while we get them into the basement." The pharmacy contact. Sedatives. This morning's coffee that Derek had made specially for Richard and me, insisting we sit and enjoy it while he and Isabel got breakfast ready. The way the room had started spinning about 20 minutes later. The fuzzy confusion as Derek grabbed my arm. His grip no longer gentle son-in-law, but something harder, meaner. Richard trying to fight him off, while Isabel, my baby girl, held me back with surprising strength. I thought I was having some kind of medical episode, a side effect of the Parkinson's I hadn't told anyone about. Never occurred to me that my own daughter had drugged me. "How did you know?" I whispered. "How did you know they'd do this today?" "I didn't know for certain," Richard admitted. "But Derek's gambling debts come due in 60 days. I've been monitoring his communications. He's sloppy with his phone security. The loan sharks have been getting more aggressive. I knew he was desperate. I knew he'd make a move soon. So I contacted Detective Morrison 2 weeks ago, gave him copies of everything, told him I suspected my son-in-law was planning something criminal. We agreed that I'd call when it happened, that we'd need them caught in the act for the charges to stick." From upstairs, Derek's voice suddenly boomed, making us both freeze. "Yes, that's right. The deed's being transferred this morning. The old people are taken care of, locked up nice and safe." He was on the phone, selling my house while I was still alive, still breathing, still trapped in my own basement. Then Isabel's voice, shrill with panic. "Derek, you need to hurry. What if someone comes by? What if someone notices they're missing?" Richard picked up the landline phone in the hidden room and dialed a number already programmed in. "Detective Morrison? It's Richard Fairmont. They've executed the plan. Yes, we're safe in the location we discussed. The recordings are running." A pause. "Understood. We'll wait for your signal." He hung up and looked at me with an expression I'd seen 1,000 times in our marriage, the look that said he'd just made a decision he knew I wouldn't like, but that had to be made anyway. "I needed them to actually commit the crimes, Adrienne. Attempted fraud wasn't enough. I needed false imprisonment, actual forgery, actual theft. I needed enough to protect you legally, to make sure they couldn't hurt you again. You let this happen," I said slowly, the realization dawning. "You knew they'd drug us, trap us down here, and you let it happen." "I let it happen in a controlled way," he corrected. "I made sure we'd be safe. I made sure we had this room, this evidence, this escape. I made sure the police would catch them red-handed." His voice dropped. "I made sure that when this was over, you'd finally be free of the fear that our daughter would destroy you." Before I could respond, a sound from upstairs made my blood run cold. A scream. Isabel's voice, high and terrified. "Derek! Derek, there's someone at the door! Oh my God, it's the police!" I should have seen it coming. That's what haunted me as Richard moved to the hidden room's control panel, his fingers steady on buttons I didn't know existed. I should have recognized the signs years before this moment, before my daughter's screams of panic echoed through the floorboards above us, before police boots thundered across the hardwood floors I'd personally selected from a sustainable forest in Oregon. The truth was, the cracks had been showing for decades. I'd just been too busy building an empire to notice my family crumbling beneath me. It started, I suppose, the day I came home from the hospital with Isabel 32 years ago. Richard had taken 2 weeks off from his architecture firm, rearranged his entire schedule to be the primary caregiver while I recovered. But I couldn't stay still. 3 days after giving birth, I was on conference calls from our bedroom, reviewing clinical trial data for a new cardiac medication my company was developing. A week later, I was back in the office part-time. By week 3, I was traveling to FDA meetings in Washington. "She needs you," Richard had said one night, holding our crying infant while I packed for a trip to meet with hospital administrators in Boston. "I can feed her, change her, hold her, but I'm not her mother. I'm doing this for her," I'd snapped back, exhausted and guilty and defensive. "So she never has to choose between formula and rent like my mother did. So she grows up secure." Richard hadn't argued. That was his way. He just looked at me with those gentle brown eyes and said, "Just make sure you're building something she can actually inherit, not just something you can leave behind." I hadn't understood what he meant. Not then. Not for 32 years. The pharmaceutical company had been my father's originally, a small, struggling neighborhood pharmacy in Hartford that barely kept our family fed. When he died of a heart attack at 53, worked into an early grave by stress and long hours, I was 24 years old with a chemistry degree and a chip on my shoulder the size of Connecticut. My mother wanted to sell the pharmacy, take the money, retire to Florida. I begged her to give me 1 year. Just 1 year to try to turn it around. It took me 3 years to transform that failing corner pharmacy into a regional pharmaceutical distributor. 5 years after that, we were manufacturing our own generic medications. 10 years in, we were developing proprietary formulations and competing with major players. By the time Isabel turned 18, Fairmont Pharmaceuticals employed 3,000 people across 4 states and was valued at $200 million. I'd won. I'd beaten poverty, beaten the odds, beaten every man who told me a woman couldn't run a pharmaceutical empire. But the victory had cost me things I didn't know how to value at the time. Isabel's first word was, "Dada." I wasn't there to hear it. I was in Chicago negotiating a distribution contract. Her first steps happened while I was touring our new manufacturing facility in New Jersey. Richard recorded it, sent me the video, and I watched it on my phone during a lunch meeting, tears streaming down my face while I smiled and nodded at whatever the hospital procurement director was saying. I missed her 5th birthday party because of an FDA inspection, missed her first day of middle school because of investor meetings, missed her high school graduation because I was keynoting a pharmaceutical conference in Geneva, a speech that was supposed to cement my reputation as an industry leader. "It's fine, Mom," Isabel had said on the phone when I called to apologize, her voice flat and emotionless at 18 years old. "I'm used to it." Those 4 words should have shattered me. Instead, I'd rationalized them away. She understood. She was mature. She knew I was building something important, building security for our family, building a legacy. The real fracture came 6 months ago, long before this morning's betrayal. Though I understand now, it was just the visible manifestation of a break that had been deepening for years. Isabel had appeared at the mansion on a Tuesday afternoon in May. No call ahead, no warning, just suddenly standing in my office doorway wearing an expression I couldn't quite read. I'd been organizing my retirement documents, planning the Medical Research Institute that would be funded by my share of the company's sale. $40 million to invest in Parkinson's research, early detection, treatment options for people who didn't have the resources I did. "I need $2 million, she'd said. Not asked, stated. As if it was already decided. As if the money was already hers. I'd looked up from my laptop, confused by the tone more than the request. For what? Does it matter? She'd crossed her arms, defensive and hostile, in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of myself at business negotiations. "You have $40 million coming from the company sale. $2 million is nothing to you." "It's not about the amount," I'd said carefully, closing the laptop to give her my full attention. "It's about understanding what you need it for. A house? A business investment? What's this about?" "It's about the fact that I'm 32 years old, and I've been waiting my entire life for you to actually invest in me the way you invested in your precious company," she'd spat out, and I'd physically recoiled from the venom in her voice. "It's about the fact that Derek and I have a life we're trying to build, and we need capital, and you have more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes." My chest had tightened. The Parkinson's diagnosis was only 2 weeks old at that point, still raw and terrifying, and I hadn't told anyone yet. Hadn't figured out how to say the words out loud. "I'm sick. The brilliant, invincible Adrienne Fairmont is sick with something I can't control, can't fix, can't negotiate my way out of. I'm not giving you $2 million without knowing what it's for, I'd said, trying to keep my voice level. That's not how responsible financial planning works. If you and Derek have a business opportunity, show me a proposal. Let me understand the investment. Of course, she'd laughed, bitter and sharp. Everything's a business transaction with you. Even your own daughter. You know what? Forget it. Forget I asked. Forget I thought maybe, just once, you might actually act like a mother instead of a CEO. She'd stormed out before I could respond, leaving me sitting in my office with trembling hands and a pain in my chest that had nothing to do with my recent diagnosis. I should have gone after her. Should have explained that I was trying to protect her from Derek, who Richard had been quietly warning me about for months. Should have told her about the Parkinson's, about my fears, about the real reason I was being so careful with my estate planning. Should have said the words I'd been too proud, or too scared, or too busy to say for 32 years, I love you, and I'm sorry I was a terrible mother. But I didn't. I let her leave. Told myself she was being dramatic, entitled, manipulative. Told myself she'd calm down, and we'd talk about it rationally later. Richard had found me an hour later, still sitting at my desk, staring at nothing. You turned her down, he'd said. Not a question. She wouldn't tell me what the money was for. I'd defended myself. She just demanded it like I owed her. You do owe her, Richard had said quietly, and the words had cut deeper than Isabel's anger. Maybe not $2 million, but you owe her something. Time, attention, the chance to matter more than a quarterly earnings report. That's not fair, I'd protested. I worked 80-hour weeks so she could have everything. Private schools, nice clothes, trips to Europe, a penthouse in Manhattan. She's never wanted for anything. Except a mother, Richard had said. And then he'd left me alone with that truth. Over the following months, Isabel and Derek's visits had increased. They'd come by 2-3 times a week, always with some excuse about checking on us or wanting to spend more family time. Derek would make coffee. Isabel would chat about her design projects that never seemed to materialize into actual clients. They'd ask questions about the house, about my retirement plans, about the estate. I'd thought they were trying to rebuild our relationship. I'd actually felt hopeful, grateful that maybe my daughter was ready to move past our fight, ready to be a family again. Richard had known better. I understood that now, standing in his secret room surrounded by evidence of our daughter's betrayal. He'd been watching, documenting, preparing for this moment while I'd been blind to everything except my own guilt and hope. The Parkinson's had been progressing slowly over those 4 months. Tremors in my hands that I blamed on stress. Occasional stiffness in my movements that I attributed to age. The neurologist had been optimistic, caught early, manageable with medication, years of quality life ahead if I was careful. But I'd hidden it from everyone. From Richard, from Isabel, from my doctors at the pharmaceutical company, who would have understood better than anyone. Hidden it because admitting I was sick felt like admitting I was weak, vulnerable, human, in ways that terrified me. I'd planned to tell my family after I'd organized everything. After the Medical Research Institute was established, after my will was properly structured, after I'd figured out how to talk about mortality with people I'd spent a lifetime proving I was invincible to. Now, listening to police officers shouting commands upstairs, hearing my daughter sobbing in genuine terror, I realized that all my planning, all my control, all my careful construction of the perfect legacy had been built on a foundation of sand. I hadn't protected Isabel from poverty. I'd protected her from nothing, because I'd been too busy protecting my own fears, my own insecurities, my own desperate need to prove I was worth something beyond the scared little girl whose father died broke and exhausted. And in doing so, I'd created a daughter who hated me enough to lock me in a basement and steal everything I'd built. Richard's hand found mine in the dim light of the hidden room. 35 years of marriage, and he'd never stopped trying to anchor me when I was drowning. It's not too late, he said softly. It's never too late to choose differently. But as heavy footsteps descended the basement stairs, and a police officer called out, asking if we were okay, if we needed medical attention, I wasn't sure I believed him. Some choices, once made, can't be unmade. Some damage runs too deep to repair. I was about to find out which kind we were dealing with. Richard pressed a button on the control panel, and the hidden door slid open smoothly. A young police officer stood on the other side, hand on his weapon, eyes scanning the basement with professional wariness. When he saw us emerge from what must have looked like solid wall, his eyebrows shot up. "Mr. and Mrs. Fairmont? I'm Officer Martinez. Are you both all right? Do you need medical assistance?" "We're fine," Richard said, his voice steady despite everything. "Shaken, but unharmed. They used sedatives earlier, something in our coffee this morning, but we've had a few hours for it to wear off." The officer spoke into his radio, relaying our status to someone upstairs. Then he gestured toward the stairs. "Detective Morrison is upstairs. He'd like to speak with you both. Your daughter and son-in-law are being detained in the living room." My legs felt unsteady as we climbed the basement stairs. Richard's hand stayed on my lower back, supporting me the way he'd been supporting me for 35 years, while I'd been too focused on everything else to notice. The tremor in my hands had nothing to do with Parkinson's now. It was pure adrenaline and dread. The scene in my living room was surreal. Isabel sat on the cream-colored sofa I'd imported from Italy, her face blotchy and red from crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She looked younger than 32, looked like the little girl who used to wait up for me to come home from business trips, falling asleep on this same couch with her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Derek stood near the fireplace, hands cuffed behind his back, 2 officers flanking him. His face had lost all its usual charm, all that practiced real estate agent smoothness. He looked gray, panicked, cornered. When he saw me, something desperate flashed in his eyes. "Mrs. Fairmont, thank God," he started, and I recognized that tone. The same one he'd used when asking to borrow our vacation house in the Hamptons, when requesting money for a sure-thing investment opportunity, when explaining away suspicious charges on the credit card Isabel shared with him. Earnest, persuasive, utterly false. "This is all a huge misunderstanding. We were just—" "Stop talking," one of the officers said sharply. "You've been read your rights. Anything you say can be used against you." A man in a gray suit approached us, 50-something with kind eyes and an air of competence that reminded me of the FDA investigators I'd dealt with over the years. "Mrs. Fairmont, Mr. Fairmont, I'm Detective Morrison. Your husband and I have been in communication for the past 2 weeks regarding your concerns about potential fraud and elder abuse." Elder abuse. The words made me flinch. I was 57 years old, had run a multi-million-dollar company until 6 months ago, still did yoga 3 times a week, and could negotiate a contract that would make lawyers weep. Elder abuse was something that happened to fragile old people, not to me. But that's exactly what this was, wasn't it? My daughter and son-in-law had drugged me, imprisoned me, planned to steal my home. The fact that I was successful and educated didn't make it any less abuse. "I need to take statements from both of you," Detective Morrison continued. "But first, there's something you should hear. Mr. Chen was on the phone when we arrived, and he said some things we recorded, things you need to know about." He pulled out a small digital recorder and pressed play. Derek's voice filled my elegant living room, the same voice that had called me Mom at Thanksgiving dinners, that had toasted to family at Isabel's birthday parties. "Yeah, I've got the deed transfer ready to go," Derek was saying on the recording. "The old bitch is locked in the basement with her husband. They won't be a problem much longer." A pause, then. "What do you mean, how long?" "Look, I'm not keeping them down there forever. Once the house sells and I have your money, I'll call in an anonymous tip. Someone will find them eventually." Eventually. My vision swam. He'd been planning to leave us locked in that basement for days, maybe weeks. We could have died down there, dehydrated, starved, alone in the dark. Isabel made a strangled sound, her face going from red to white in an instant. "Derek, what is he talking about? You said we were just going to scare them, make them sign the papers, that we'd let them out after—" "Shut up, Isabel," Derek snarled, dropping all pretense of the loving husband. "Just shut your stupid mouth for once." The officer nearest to him moved forward slightly, a warning. Derek's jaw clenched, but he fell silent. Detective Morrison stopped the recording. "There's more, but I think you get the picture. Mr. Chen has been communicating with known loan sharks about gambling debts totaling $320,000. He's also been passing confidential client information to these individuals, information about when wealthy clients would be traveling, what valuables they kept in their homes, We've connected him to at least 2 burglaries in Greenwich over the past 8 months. The room tilted. I gripped Richard's arm to steady myself. Derek wasn't just a gambler who'd gotten in over his head. He was actively criminal, actively dangerous, and I'd welcomed him into my home, defended him to Richard, allowed him near my daughter. Mrs. Fairmont, Detective Morrison said gently, I know this is overwhelming, but I need to ask, do you want to press charges against your daughter as well as your son-in-law? The question hung in the air like smoke. Every eye in the room turned to me. Isabel's face crumpled, new tears streaming down her cheeks. Mom, please, she whispered. Please. I didn't know about the loan sharks. I didn't know he was planning to leave you down there. I swear I thought we were just going to scare you into signing over the house. I never wanted to hurt you. You just wanted to lock me in a basement and steal my home, I finished, my voice coming out harder than I'd intended. You just wanted to drug me, imprison me, take everything I'd worked for. But you didn't want to hurt me. I was angry, Isabel cried, standing up from the couch. The officer nearest her moved closer, but she didn't seem to notice. I've been angry my whole life, Mom. Do you have any idea what it was like being your daughter? Perfect Adrienne Fairmont, CEO, philanthropist, woman of the year, while I was just the kid you forgot about half the time? The words should have hurt. They did hurt. But they also felt like something breaking open, like an infection finally being lanced after years of festering beneath the surface. You're right, I said, and watched shock replace some of the anger in her face. You're absolutely right. I was a terrible mother. I chose my career over you 1,000 times. I missed everything that mattered because I was so obsessed with proving I wasn't the poor girl from Hartford anymore. I failed you, Isabel. Completely and absolutely. She blinked, seeming thrown by my agreement. Then why couldn't you just give me the money? Why couldn't you just help me when I asked? Because I'm sick, I said, and the words came out before I'd consciously decided to say them. The secret I'd been holding for 4 months, the diagnosis I'd hidden from everyone, suddenly felt ridiculous to keep hiding. I have Parkinson's disease, early stage, manageable, but progressive. I found out 4 months ago, and I've been trying to organize my estate, set up a medical research institute, plan for a future where I might not be able to make my own decisions anymore. Isabel's mouth opened, closed. For a moment, she looked exactly like she had at 7 years old when I'd told her that Grandma had died. Lost, scared, desperately wanting someone to tell her everything would be okay. You're sick? She whispered. And you didn't tell me? I didn't tell anyone, I admitted. I was going to, after I'd gotten everything organized. I wanted to have a plan first, wanted to have solutions ready, wanted to control everything, Richard finished quietly. Even your own illness. Even your own mortality. He was right. Of course he was right. I'd spent my entire life trying to control outcomes, manage risks, plan for every contingency. The idea of admitting vulnerability, of asking for help, of being sick without having already solved the problem myself, it went against everything I'd built my identity around. Detective Morrison cleared his throat. Mrs. Fairmont, I still need to know. Are you pressing charges against your daughter? I looked at Isabel. Really looked at her for the first time in years maybe, saw past the designer clothes and the professional makeup and the woman she'd become, saw the little girl I'd failed, but also saw the adult who'd made choices, who'd chosen to believe her manipulative husband over her own parents, who'd chosen crime over conversation, who'd chosen revenge over reconciliation. I need to know something first, I said, directing my words to Isabel. The forged power of attorney 2 years ago that Richard discovered, was that Derek's idea or yours? She flinched, looking away. Mine, she admitted quietly. I was so angry after you missed my birthday again because of some pharmaceutical conference. Derek said I had every right to take what should have been mine anyway, but it was my idea to try the power of attorney. When it didn't work, when the lawyer asked too many questions, I got scared and dropped it. And this time, I pressed. Drugging us, locking us in the basement. Whose idea? Isabel's face twisted. Derek planned most of it, but I knew. I knew what we were doing. I helped. I'm not going to stand here and pretend I'm some innocent victim. She laughed bitterly. Isn't that what you always wanted? For me to take responsibility for my choices? Well, here I am, Mom. Taking responsibility. I helped my husband drug you and lock you in your own basement because I was so eaten up with resentment and jealousy that I convinced myself you deserved it. The honesty was brutal, but it was also more real than anything Isabel had said to me in years. Detective Morrison shifted his weight, waiting for my answer. Richard's hand found mine, squeezed gently, not guiding my decision, just reminding me he was there, that whatever I chose, I wouldn't be facing it alone. I opened my mouth to respond, but then Isabel spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm pregnant." The room went absolutely silent. Even the police officers seemed to freeze. "What?" I heard myself say. 8 weeks, Isabel said, her hand moving protectively to her still flat stomach. "I haven't even told Derek yet. I was going to, after we—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "After we successfully stole your house and destroyed your life." The implications crashed over me. My daughter was pregnant. I was going to be a grandmother. And Isabel had committed felonies while carrying my grandchild, had put herself and an innocent baby at risk because of hatred that I'd helped create. Derek's voice cut through my thoughts, sharp and cruel. "Oh, perfect. Of course you're pregnant. That's just perfect, Isabel. Because a baby is exactly what we need right now when I'm looking at jail time and you're—" I said stop talking, the officer warned him again. But Derek was past caring, past keeping up appearances. "You know what? She deserves everything she's getting," he spat, looking directly at me with pure hatred. "You and your holier-than-thou attitude, your perfect, successful life, looking down on everyone. You think you're so much better than everyone else. You ruined Isabel, turned her into this needy, insecure mess who could never measure up to Mommy's impossible standards, and now you're going to send her to prison while you play the victim? Mr. Chen, I'm warning you," the officer started. "I'm done being warned," Derek shouted. "I'm done pretending this family isn't completely dysfunctional. Adrienne Fairmont, perfect CEO, perfect philanthropist, worst mother in the world. You want to know why Isabel helped me? Because for once in her pathetic life, someone paid attention to her. Someone made her feel like she mattered more than a quarterly earnings report." "That's enough," Richard said, his voice cutting through Derek's tirade with unexpected authority. My quiet, gentle husband stepped forward, and something in his posture made everyone in the room pay attention. "You will not speak to my wife that way. You will not blame your criminal behavior on anyone but yourself. And you will certainly not pretend you care about my daughter when I have hours of recorded footage of you calling her stupid, pathetic, and a meal ticket to your loan shark friends." Derek's face went slack with shock. He hadn't known about the recordings. Hadn't known that his private phone calls, his whispered conversations with Isabel, his real thoughts about all of us had been captured and documented. "You've been recording us?" Isabel's voice was small, hurt. "Dad, you've been spying on us?" "I've been protecting your mother from someone I suspected was dangerous," Richard corrected. "And I was right. Derek never loved you, Isabel. He saw a vulnerable, angry young woman with wealthy parents, and he exploited every insecurity you had. I have recordings of him laughing about how easy you were to manipulate. I have videos of him planning to take the money from selling this house and disappearing, leaving you behind to deal with the consequences." Isabel's face crumpled. She sank back onto the couch, her whole body shaking with sobs that sounded like they were being torn from somewhere deep inside her. "I'm so stupid," she gasped between sobs. "I'm so stupid." And watching my daughter break apart, understanding that she'd been manipulated and used while also having made real, harmful choices, I realized that Detective Morrison's question didn't have a simple answer. Did I want to press charges against Isabel? Did I want to see my pregnant daughter go to jail? Did I want to punish her for being angry about legitimate grievances, even though she'd expressed that anger through criminal actions? Or did I want to find some way forward that acknowledged both the harm she'd caused and the harm I'd caused her? "Detective Morrison," I said slowly, my mind racing through implications and possibilities the way it used to race through pharmaceutical development. Strategies. What are my options here? Not just legally, but practically. What happens if I press charges against Derek, but not Isabel? What happens if I press charges against both? What happens if I don't press charges at all? He studied me for a moment, then nodded with what looked like approval. Let me lay it out for you. Detective Morrison gestured to the dining room, away from Derek's furious glare and Isabel's broken sobbing. Richard and I followed him, and I was grateful for the temporary escape from the suffocating tension of the living room. Through the archway, I could still see my daughter curled into herself on the couch, an officer standing nearby, and Derek being led toward the front door in handcuffs, still muttering angrily under his breath. "Here's the situation," Detective Morrison began, his voice low and professional. "Against Mr. Chen, we have overwhelming evidence. The recordings your husband provided, the phone calls with loan sharks, connections to previous burglaries, conspiracy to commit fraud, false imprisonment, administering drugs without consent. He's looking at significant prison time, probably 8 to 12 years if he's convicted on all counts. 8 to 12 years. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I just felt tired. As for your daughter," he continued, "it's more complicated. She's clearly complicit. She participated in drugging you, in the imprisonment, in the fraud attempt. That's serious. But she's also arguably a victim of manipulation by Mr. Chen. A good defense attorney could make the case that she was under her husband's psychological control, that he exploited her emotional vulnerabilities." "She's pregnant," I said, the words still feeling unreal. 8 weeks pregnant with my grandchild." Morrison nodded. "That will factor into any sentencing if it comes to that. Judges are often more lenient with pregnant defendants, especially first-time offenders. But Mrs. Fairmont, I need to be clear with you. If you choose not to press charges, it doesn't mean she faces no consequences. The state can still prosecute based on the evidence we have. Your testimony would make the case stronger, but we can proceed without it if necessary." "And if I do press charges?" I asked. "Then she's looking at 3 to 5 years, probably. Less with a plea deal. With pregnancy and no prior record, she might get probation, house arrest, substantial community service. It depends on the prosecutor, the judge, her legal representation. 3 to 5 years. My daughter, pregnant with my grandchild, in prison. Or house arrest, unable to work, unable to build any kind of life, marked forever as a felon. The baby would be born while she was serving her sentence. What kind of start was that for a child? But if I didn't press charges, what message did that send? That wealthy people could commit crimes against their own parents and face no consequences because of family connections. That money and privilege meant accountability didn't matter? "I need a minute," I said. "I need to think." Morrison nodded understandingly. "Take your time. I have to process Mr. Chen anyway. We'll transport him to the station for booking within the next 30 minutes. He paused. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Fairmont, there's no right answer here. Whatever you decide, make sure it's something you can live with long term." He left us alone in the dining room. Through the window, I could see the autumn afternoon sun filtering through the trees I'd planted when we first bought this house 20 years ago. Oak and maple, chosen because Richard said they'd outlive us, would still be providing shade and beauty long after we were gone. Legacy trees, he'd called them. "What are you thinking?" Richard asked quietly. "I'm thinking that I spent 30 years building a company, and I know exactly how to handle corporate fraud, insider trading, breach of contract. I know policy and procedure and legal frameworks." I turned to face him. "But I have no idea how to handle this. My daughter tried to destroy me, but I helped create the person who was capable of that. Derek manipulated her, but she chose to be manipulated. She's pregnant with our grandchild, but that doesn't erase what she did. I don't know what justice looks like here." Richard was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you remember what you told me when you were deciding whether to sell the company?" I thought back to those agonizing months of negotiation, of weighing offers, of trying to figure out when to let go of something I'd spent my entire adult life building. I said I wanted to leave a legacy that would outlive me, that would do more good in the world than just making money. "You chose to fund Parkinson's research instead of keeping the company in the family," Richard continued. "You chose impact over dynasty, and I think you need to make a similar choice now. Not what punishes Isabel most severely, not what makes you look strong or sends a message, but what actually creates the possibility of healing, of breaking the cycle you're both caught in. She committed crimes, Richard. Real crimes. People don't just get to walk away from that because we share DNA. I'm not saying she should walk away," he said. I'm saying you need to decide what you actually want the outcome to be. Do you want her in prison? Do you want her to suffer the way you've suffered? Or do you want something else? I closed my eyes, trying to push past the hurt and betrayal and anger to figure out what I actually wanted. Not what I should want, not what would look right to outsiders, but what would let me sleep at night 5 years from now. What I wanted was my daughter back. The little girl who used to draw me pictures of us holding hands, who used to say, "I love you, Mommy," every night before bed, who used to believe I hung the moon. But that little girl was gone, replaced by a woman who hated me enough to lock me in a basement. What I wanted was a grandchild who didn't grow up visiting their mother in prison, who didn't inherit this legacy of resentment and revenge and broken family bonds. What I wanted was for Isabel to understand the magnitude of what she'd done, to face real consequences, but also to have a chance at becoming someone better than the person Derek had helped her become. I want her to get help, I said finally. Real help. Not just punishment, but actual therapy, actual work on understanding why she made these choices. I want her to face consequences, but I want them to be consequences that might actually change her, not just destroy her. Richard nodded. Then tell Morrison that. We walked back into the living room. Isabel looked up as we entered, her eyes red and swollen, her face blotchy. She looked younger than I'd seen her in years, stripped of all the defensive armor and sophisticated veneer. She looked terrified. "Mom," she started, but I held up my hand. "Let me speak first," I said. "Detective Morrison, I want to press full charges against Derek Chen. I want him prosecuted to the maximum extent of the law. He's dangerous, manipulative, and he needs to be stopped before he hurts anyone else." Derek, still near the doorway in handcuffs, let out a string of curses that made the officers move to remove him from the room entirely. I watched him go, felt nothing but relief that he'd be out of our lives. As for Isabel, I continued, turning to face my daughter directly, I'm not going to press charges. Isabel's face flooded with relief, and she started to stand, but I held up my hand again. Wait, let me finish. I'm not pressing charges on 2 conditions. First, you accept a plea agreement that includes mandatory therapy, at least twice a week for a minimum of 2 years. Not couples therapy with Derek. Individual therapy focused on your issues, your choices, your relationship with me, and with yourself. And you give me permission to speak with your therapist periodically to verify you're actually doing the work. Isabel nodded frantically. Yes, anything. I'll do anything. Second, I said, my voice harder now, you do community service. 500 hours working at one of the free clinics that my medical research institute will be funding. You'll see what it's like to actually earn something, to contribute something, to be part of helping people instead of using them. And you'll do this while pregnant, while uncomfortable, while it's difficult, because choices have consequences, Isabel. And these are yours. The relief in her face had shifted to something more complex, gratitude mixed with apprehension, hope mixed with fear. And third, I added, you stay away from Derek. Completely. You file for divorce, you cut all contact, and if I find out you've communicated with him in any way, the deal is off and I pursue full charges. Do you understand? I understand, she whispered. Mom, I'm so sorry, I know, I said, but sorry isn't enough. Sorry is just words. I need to see you become someone different, someone better. Can you do that? She nodded, tears streaming down her face again. I'll try. I swear I'll try. I looked at Detective Morrison. Will that work? Legally? He considered for a moment, then nodded slowly. I'll need to discuss it with the prosecutor, but given the circumstances, first offense, pregnancy, your willingness to support a conditional plea agreement with substantial rehabilitation requirements, I think we can make it work. It might take a few days to formalize everything. Then let's do it, I said. And just like that, the decision was made. Not perfect, not clean, but maybe, possibly, a chance at something better than revenge. The police took Derek away 40 minutes later, and I watched through the window as they put him in the back of the patrol car. He was still shouting, his face twisted with rage, spitting words I couldn't hear but could imagine. Isabel sat motionless on the couch, staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. An officer stayed with her, explaining the process she'd need to follow in the coming days. Meeting with the prosecutor, signing the plea agreement, arranging for her community service placement. I should have felt victorious. The threat was neutralized. Derek would be in prison for years, and Isabel would face consequences while still having a chance at redemption. This was the best possible outcome, given the circumstances. So why did I feel like I was standing in the ruins of something that could never be rebuilt? Richard went to make coffee. Real coffee this time, not the drugged poison Derek had served us this morning. The normalcy of the gesture felt absurd, given everything that had happened, but I was grateful for it. Grateful for something ordinary and safe in the middle of this nightmare. Detective Morrison approached me with a tablet in his hand. Mrs. Fairmont, before I leave, I need to show you something else. Your husband's surveillance system caught more than just Isabel and Derek's planning. There's footage from last night that I think you should see. It might help you understand your daughter's state of mind. I wasn't sure I wanted to understand anything else right now. My emotional capacity felt maxed out, stretched beyond what I thought I could handle. But I took the tablet anyway. The video showed Isabel and Derek in one of our guest bedrooms late last night. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. They must have been staying over, something they'd done occasionally over the past few months. Another detail I'd thought meant reconciliation, but had actually been reconnaissance. On screen, Derek was pacing, agitated. Isabel sat on the bed, hugging a pillow to her chest. Tomorrow morning, Derek was saying. We do it tomorrow morning. I'll make the coffee. Put the sedatives in like we discussed. An hour later, they'll be out cold, and we move them to the basement. By tomorrow afternoon, the deed will be transferred, and I can start negotiations with buyers. I don't know if I can do this. Isabel's voice on the recording was small, frightened. Derek, this is my mother. What if something goes wrong? What if what? Derek snapped. What if you have to take responsibility for once in your privileged life? What if you have to actually commit to something instead of just talking about it? That's not fair, Isabel protested weakly. You know what's not fair? Derek moved closer to her, his voice dropping to something cold and controlled. What's not fair is that I'm $300,000 in debt to people who will literally kill me if I don't pay up. What's not fair is that your mother is sitting on $40 million and wouldn't give you a fraction of it when you asked. What's not fair is that we have a chance to fix everything, to finally have the life we deserve, and you're getting cold feet. I'm not getting cold feet, Isabel said, but her voice betrayed her uncertainty. I keep thinking about when I was little, and she used to read to me on the nights she was home. She did try, Derek. In her way, she tried. Derek's laugh was cruel. She tried. She abandoned you for her precious career. She chose board meetings over your birthday parties, chose pharmaceutical conferences over your graduation, and now you're defending her? I'm not defending her, Isabel said quickly. You're just weak, Derek interrupted. Just like she always said you were. Unable to commit, unable to follow through, unable to be anything more than a disappointment. I felt Richard's hand on my shoulder. I hadn't heard him come back with the coffee. Keep watching, he said quietly. On screen, Isabel's face hardened at Derek's words. She never said I was weak. She didn't have to say it. She showed it every day of your life. Every time she chose work over you, she was saying you weren't worth her time. You weren't important enough. You weren't successful enough to deserve her attention. Isabel was crying now on the video, silent tears streaming down her face. I just want her to see me. Just once, I want her to look at me the way she looked at her company, like I matter, like I'm worth something. Then take what's yours, Derek said, kneeling in front of her, taking her hands in his. His voice had shifted to something softer, more manipulative. Take the house, take the money, take what she values most, make her feel what you've felt your whole life, powerless, invisible, unimportant. That's the only language she understands, Isabel. Power. I watched my daughter's face on the screen, watched the moment she made her choice, watched her nod, wipe her tears, and say, okay, tomorrow morning, we do it. But then, just before the video ended, Isabel said something else, something that made my breath catch. Derek, I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. I took a test 3 days ago. The expression that crossed Derek's face in that unguarded moment was chilling. Not joy, not excitement, not even surprise. Just cold calculation. How convenient, he said flatly. What do you mean, convenient? I thought you'd be happy. We talked about having kids someday. Someday when we had money, Isabel. Not now. Not when we're in the middle of this. He stood up, running his hands through his hair in frustration. Do you have any idea how this complicates things? Complicates things? Isabel's voice rose. Derek, we're having a baby. Our baby. How is that a complication? Because pregnant women get sympathy in court, Derek said, and the mask had completely fallen off now. Because if anything goes wrong tomorrow, you're going to look like a victim, and I'm going to look like the manipulative husband who took advantage of a vulnerable pregnant woman. The silence on the video stretched out. I could see Isabel processing his words, understanding slowly dawning on her face. You're worried about how my pregnancy affects you legally? She asked slowly. Not about the baby? Not about us becoming parents? Don't be naive, Derek said dismissively. Everything affects us legally right now. We're about to commit multiple felonies. We need to think strategically. We're having a child together and you're thinking strategically? One of us has to think, period, Derek snapped. You're too busy having feelings to consider the actual logistics of what we're doing. I watched my daughter's face crumble on the screen. Watched her realize, maybe for the first time, what kind of man she'd married. What kind of man she'd chosen to trust with her deepest resentments and fears. I want to call it off, Isabel said suddenly. I don't want to do this anymore. We'll find another way to get the money. There is no other way. Derek's voice was sharp enough to make Isabel flinch. I have 60 days before Victor's guys come for me. 60 days to come up with $320,000 plus interest. There is no other way, Isabel. We're doing this. But Derek, we're doing this, he repeated, his voice dropping to something quiet and dangerous. Unless you want to explain to your loan shark in-laws why you couldn't follow through. Unless you want to explain to them how their money disappeared because you got sentimental about Mommy. The threat hung in the air. I watched Isabel shrink back, watched fear replace her momentary rebellion. Okay, she whispered. Okay, we'll do it. The video ended. I looked up at Detective Morrison with tears streaming down my face. She tried to stop it. At the last minute, she tried to stop it. She did, Morrison confirmed. And then she let herself be threatened and manipulated into continuing. That's the complexity here, Mrs. Fairmont. Your daughter is both victim and perpetrator. She's been psychologically abused by her husband, but she also made choices. She chose to go through with it even after having doubts. I turned to look at Isabel, still sitting on the couch. She'd seen me watching the video, had to know what I'd just witnessed. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw shame and pain and something that might have been relief that the truth was finally out. I need to talk to her, I said. Alone. Morrison hesitated. Mrs. Fairmont, I'm not sure that's advisable right now. Emotions are running high, and I need to talk to my daughter, I repeated, my voice firm with the authority I'd used in boardrooms for 3 decades. Please, give us 15 minutes. He looked at Richard, who nodded. They'll be fine, my husband said quietly. They need this. Morrison reluctantly gestured to the officer watching Isabel, and they both retreated to the kitchen, giving us privacy, but staying within earshot. Richard squeezed my hand once, then followed them, leaving Isabel and me alone in the living room that had seen so many family gatherings, so many holidays, so many moments when we'd been physically together but emotionally miles apart. I sat down on the couch next to her, not too close, leaving space between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, I could hear birds singing, oblivious to the fact that my world had just imploded. I saw the video from last night, I finally said. I heard you try to call it off. Isabel's hands twisted in her lap. But I didn't call it off. I let him convince me to go through with it anyway. That's what matters. Why, I asked. Why did you let him talk you into it when you knew it was wrong? She was quiet for so long, I thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, because I've spent my entire life feeling like I wasn't enough. Not smart enough, not successful enough, not worth paying attention to. And Derek paid attention to me. He made me feel important, valuable, seen. And I was so desperate for that feeling that I ignored everything else. The red flags, the manipulation, the way he always had an excuse for why he needed money or why his business deals fell through. I ignored it all because for the first time in my life, someone chose me first. The words cut deep because they were true. I hadn't chosen her first. I'd chosen my career, my ambitions, my need to prove myself. Over and over, for 32 years, I'd chosen everything else. "I'm sorry," I said, and my voice broke on the words. "Isabel, I'm so sorry. You deserved better than the mother I was. You deserved someone who showed up, who paid attention, who made you feel valued just for being you, not for any achievement or success. You deserve so much better." She turned to look at me, and the tears streaming down her face matched my own. I deserved better. But that didn't give me the right to do what I did. That didn't justify locking you in a basement, Mom. No matter how angry I was, no matter how hurt I felt, what I did was wrong, unforgivably wrong. "Not unforgivably," I said, reaching out to take her hand. She flinched at first, then let me hold it. "Wrong, yes. Hurtful, absolutely. Criminal, legally speaking. But not unforgivable. Nothing is unforgivable between a mother and daughter if both people are willing to do the work to heal." "How can you say that?" Isabel's voice rose. "How can you sit here and talk about forgiveness when I literally drugged you and locked you in your own basement? When I planned to steal your house, your money, everything you'd worked for?" "Because I watched that video," I said. "I saw your face when Derek called you weak, when he manipulated your pain and insecurities. I saw the moment you tried to stop it, and I saw how he threatened you into continuing. And I realized something." I took a breath, trying to steady myself. "I realized that I set you up for this. Not intentionally, not consciously, but I created the vulnerabilities that Derek exploited. I created a daughter who was so hungry for validation, so desperate to be seen and valued, that she became easy prey for a manipulator. That's on me, Isabel. Your choices are yours, and you have to own them. But I have to own my part in creating the person who was capable of making those choices." Isabel sobbed, her whole body shaking. "I hate that I let him do this to me. I hate that I was so weak that I believed his lies about you, about us, about what I deserved. I hate that I'm 32 years old and I still let someone else tell me who I am." "Then let's both become different people," I said. "Let's both do the hard work of changing. You go to therapy, really commit to it, and I'll go too. I'll work on understanding why I equated love with providing money, why I couldn't show up emotionally, why I built walls instead of bridges. And maybe, if we both work hard enough, we can build something new. Not the relationship we had, but something better, something real." She looked at me with her father's eyes, searching my face for sincerity. "You really mean that? After everything I did, you're willing to try? You're having my grandchild," I said softly. "You're carrying a baby who deserves to grow up in a family that knows how to love each other, how to communicate, how to be present. I don't want that child to inherit our brokenness. I want better for them. Don't you?" Isabel's hand moved to her stomach protectively. "I want better for everything. I want to be nothing like the person I've been. I want to be a good mother, not a—" She couldn't finish. "Not like me?" I finished gently. "Then be better than me. Learn from my mistakes. Show up for your child in ways I didn't show up for you. Break the cycle." We sat there crying together, and for the first time in decades, it felt like we were actually connecting. Not mother and daughter playing our assigned roles, but two broken people acknowledging the damage we'd done to each other and choosing to try to heal anyway. Richard appeared in the doorway, his expression cautious. "Everything okay?" I looked at him. This man who'd been protecting us both in ways we hadn't understood, who'd built a safety net we didn't know we needed. "Everything's going to be okay," I said. "Eventually, with a lot of work." He nodded, relief washing over his face. "Detective Morrison needs to take Isabel's statement, and we need to finalize the arrangements for the plea agreement. Are you ready for that?" Isabel wiped her eyes, took a shaky breath, and stood up. "I'm ready. I want to tell the truth. All of it. No more lies." As I watched her walk toward the kitchen to give her statement, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly. That would take time, therapy, proof of real change. But possibility. The possibility that this catastrophic betrayal might somehow, impossibly, become the catalyst for building something better than what we'd had before. Richard sat down next to me, pulling me into his arms. I let myself lean against him, let myself be held, let myself be vulnerable in ways I'd spent a lifetime avoiding. "Thank you," I whispered against his shoulder, "for protecting me, for protecting us, for seeing what I was too blind to see." "That's what love is," he said simply. "Seeing the danger before it arrives and building safe rooms in basements just in case." I almost laughed, the absurdity of the metaphor cutting through the heavy emotion. My husband, the architect, had literally built us a safe room, had spent 2 years preparing for this exact moment, hoping it would never come but ready when it did. "I love you," I said, words I didn't say often enough, words that had gotten lost somewhere in the busyness of building empires and managing careers. "I know," he said, kissing the top of my head. "I've always known. Even when you couldn't show it, even when you couldn't say it, I knew." And sitting there in the ruins of our family, with police in my kitchen taking my daughter's confession, with my son-in-law on his way to jail, with everything I'd built threatened and shaken, I realized that Richard had given me the greatest gift possible. He'd given me a second chance, not just today, with his hidden room and his surveillance and his careful planning, but every day for 35 years. He'd given me chances to be better, to choose differently, to prioritize what mattered. Now I finally had to take one. 6 months later, I sat in the garden behind our mansion, watching the early spring bulbs push through the soil Richard had planted last fall. Daffodils and tulips, their green shoots brave against the lingering chill of March, new growth after a long winter. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. The Parkinson's tremor in my hands was more noticeable now, even with medication. I'd stopped hiding it 3 months ago, stopped pretending I was invincible, stopped carrying the weight of appearing perfect. It was exhausting, that kind of performance. I didn't have energy for it anymore. "Mom!" Isabel's voice came from the patio door. She was 7 months pregnant now, her belly prominent under the loose sweater she wore. She moved carefully down the steps, one hand on the railing, the other protectively cradling her stomach. "I'm here," I called back, watching as she made her way across the lawn to where I sat in one of the Adirondack chairs Richard had built last month. Another project. Another act of quiet love. She settled into the chair next to mine with a small grunt of effort. "Your grandson is using my ribs as a punching bag today," she said, rubbing her side. "It's a boy?" I asked, surprised. "You found out?" "Last week. I wanted to tell you in person." She paused, then added softly, "I'm naming him Henry, after Grandpa, my father, the man who'd worked himself to death trying to provide for us, who'd left me a failing pharmacy and a determination to never be poor again." Tears pricked my eyes. "He would have loved that," I managed to say. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, something that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Back then, every interaction had been loaded with decades of resentment and unspoken pain. Now, after countless therapy sessions, both individual and the family sessions we'd started 2 months ago, we were learning how to just be together without the weight of everything unsaid crushing us. "I finished my 200th hour at the clinic yesterday," Isabel said. "Dr. Patel said I'm doing really good work. She asked if I'd consider staying on part-time after I complete my 500 hours, maybe doing some design work for their expansion project." Pride bloomed in my chest, unfamiliar and warm. "That's wonderful, Isabel. Are you going to do it?" "I think so." She looked down at her hands, still not quite comfortable with accepting praise. "It feels good, you know? Actually helping people. Actually earning something, instead of just expecting things to be handed to me. Dr. Patel doesn't care that I'm Adrienne Fairmont's daughter. She cares about whether I show up on time and do the work well." "You're doing more than good work," I said. "You're building something real, something that's yours." She nodded, then reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. "I got an email from Derek's lawyer yesterday." My body tensed involuntarily. Derek had been sentenced to 8 years in prison 2 months ago. The trial had been mercifully quick. He'd taken a plea deal once he realized the mountain of evidence against him. The loan sharks he'd been involved with had also been arrested, their entire operation shut down. Derek had cooperated with prosecutors, which had reduced his sentence slightly, but he was still looking at the better part of a decade behind bars. What did he want? I asked carefully. Derek wants me to bring the baby to visit him, once Henry is born. Isabel's voice was flat, emotionless. He says he has rights as a father. His lawyer is suggesting I owe him that much. What did you tell them? I told them no. She looked at me, her expression firm in a way I'd rarely seen before therapy. I told them that Derek gave up his rights to be a father when he planned to abandon me with the consequences of his crimes, that I have the recorded evidence of him calling me stupid and pathetic in a meal ticket, that my son will not grow up thinking that kind of treatment is normal or acceptable. Good, I said quietly. That's very good, Isabel. My therapist helped me write the response, she admitted. I wanted to say a lot of other things, angrier things, but Dr. Chen, my therapist, not Derek, thank God I went back to my maiden name. She helped me see that anger gives him power. Clarity takes it away. Your therapist is right. She usually is. Isabel shifted in her chair, trying to get comfortable. She wants to do a session with you next week, if you're willing. She thinks it would be helpful for us to talk about the pregnancy together, about what kind of grandmother you want to be, what kind of support I need. 6 months ago, the suggestion would have felt like criticism, like someone else telling me I was doing it wrong. Now it just felt like an opportunity to do better. I'd like that, I said. I want to be present for Henry. Not just financially present, but actually present. I want to be the grandmother who shows up for school plays and makes cookies and remembers his favorite books. Even when it interferes with your work at the medical institute? Isabel asked, and there was no accusation in her voice, just genuine curiosity. The institute will survive if I take time off for my grandson, I said. I'm learning to delegate, learning to trust other people to carry things forward. Learning that my value isn't measured by how much I accomplish or how many hours I work. That must be hard for you, Isabel said softly. Letting go of control. Terrifying, I admitted, but also freeing. I spent 40 years proving I was worth something through achievement. Now I'm trying to learn that I'm worth something just by being, by showing up, by being present for the people I love. Richard appeared then, carrying a tray with 3 glasses of lemonade. Thought you two might want something cold, he said, setting it on the small table between our chairs. Thanks, Dad, Isabel said, reaching for a glass. The easy affection in her voice made Richard smile. He'd been the bridge between us these past 6 months, the steady presence that kept us both anchored when the therapy got hard, when old patterns tried to reassert themselves, when it would have been easier to fall back into familiar dysfunction. He'd sit with both of us separately, listening without judgment, offering perspective without pushing, loving us through our healing. Detective Morrison called this morning, Richard said, settling into a third chair. The last of Derek's loan shark contacts was sentenced yesterday. The whole operation is shut down. It's finally over. It's not over, I corrected gently. We still have years of work ahead. Isabel still has 300 hours of community service left. I still have Parkinson's that will get progressively worse. We still have to figure out how to be a family after everything that happened. But that chapter is closed. Fair enough, Richard conceded with a small smile. Isabel's hand went to her stomach again, her expression shifting. He's kicking. Want to feel? She was looking at me, offering something she'd never offered before. Permission to be part of this, part of her pregnancy, part of her life in a real way. My hands trembled, partially the Parkinson's, partially emotion, as I reached out and placed my palm on her belly. A strong kick thumped against my hand, and I laughed with pure joy. He's strong. He's a fighter, Isabel said, like his grandmother. We sat there as the afternoon sun warmed the garden, 3 generations connected by touch and choice, and the hard work of building something better than what we'd had. Henry kicked again, and I felt Richard's hand cover mine, felt Isabel's hand cover his. Thank you, Isabel said quietly, for not giving up on me, for giving me a chance to be better. Thank you for taking it, I replied, for doing the work, for choosing to change. I'm still scared, she admitted. Scared I'll mess up Henry the way I felt messed up. Scared I'll repeat the same patterns. You will mess up, I said honestly. All parents do. But you're aware of it, working on it, committed to doing better. That's what breaks cycles. Not perfection, but consciousness. Not never making mistakes, but repairing them when you do. Richard squeezed my hand. Speaking of repairs, the contractor called about the basement. The renovation is finished. They sealed up the secret room, reinforced the stairs, installed proper lighting. It's just a normal basement now. Good, I said. No more hiding. No more secrets. Well, Richard said with a slight smile, I did keep one feature from the hidden room. The emergency phone line, just in case. I looked at him. This man who'd spent our entire marriage preparing for emergencies I hoped would never come, building safety nets I didn't know I needed. Just in case, I agreed. Because that's what love was, I'd learned. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts or proving your worth through achievement. Love was showing up, being present, building safe rooms in basements just in case, planting bulbs in the fall so there would be flowers in spring, holding hands across 35 years of marriage, across 6 months of trauma and therapy, across 3 generations trying to heal. Love was choosing each other, over and over, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Henry kicked again under my palm, a reminder of the future we were building, the legacy that mattered more than houses or money or pharmaceutical empires. A legacy of presence, of repair, of breaking cycles instead of perpetuating them. The sun was setting over the garden, painting everything gold. In a few minutes, we'd go inside for dinner. Richard had been cooking lately, said he enjoyed it, enjoyed taking care of us in tangible ways. Isabel would help him, had been learning recipes in preparation for motherhood, for building a home that felt different than the one she'd grown up in. And I would sit at the table I'd barely used during my career, would be present for a meal with my family, would practice the art of showing up that I'd spent decades avoiding. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined 6 months ago when my daughter locked me in a basement. It wasn't the perfect redemption story where everything was fixed and forgiven and forgotten. But it was real, it was honest, and it was ours. Come on, Richard said, standing and offering me his hand. Dinner's almost ready. I took his hand, let him help me up, felt Isabel take my other arm to steady me as the Parkinsons made my balance uncertain. Together, the 3 of us walked back toward the house, toward dinner, toward conversation, toward the messy, imperfect work of being a family, toward home.